Hey, well, it's Wednesday night. Professor P's not here at the moment. He'll be here in just a second. He was having some technical difficulties, and he texted me saying he got blue screen to death. So I don't know if he's just restarting, rebooting, and coming back in. But it's Wednesday night. We let you guys have last week off in regards to the 4th. The Independence Day. I'm glad to see everyone here. I'll run down the list real quick. We got Lars, LP94, Buff Del Campo, Don, the One-Eyed Cat, John Wilburn, Danny Boyd, Mohawk 62, Mostly Old Parts and Rust, Patrick, Bruce Coltgen, Mama M3, so Mopars, Mustangs, and minivans, Colleen Tebow. And let's see, Fabrice Mon Repeat, hello from Northeast Dragway. So that's Chris Cox out of he's out of oh my gosh, Chesapeake, Virginia. So Buick Smith is here. Levi's Backyard Performance, Miss Cat G. Let's see. Blue Grit Garage just popped in. Says I think I'm about number 30, so I'll take it. Roger Logan, Clint Street Machines is here. Bill McKyska, Michael Schmidt, Val 360 Jimmy, and I think that's it. That's about everyone that's here that's popped in for the evening. So hopefully Professor P will be here in a minute. Oh, there he is. So there he is.
Awesome.
Yeah. Can you hear us?
What's that?
Oh man, there's something up with your mic, dude.
Well, dude, I've been having technical difficulties.
Well, it seems to be getting better somehow.
Okay, let's try it now.
Fading in and out. It's not doing so good.
Is that better?
Yeah, I think so. I think that might be better. Maybe it was on my end. I was leaning on the cord of my microphone, so that could be the case. So, yeah. All right. Michael Schmidt says, what am I chewing on? I'm chewing on some gum, the kind that makes you quit smoking. So, today's day one for me. Yeah. Today's day one for me, so I decided to just not do it anymore. Get to the age where it's probably not appropriate any longer.
See if I can. Trying to get the mic. I had to change headphones because I broke my headphones. All right, go ahead and speak real quick so I can hear you.
Yeah, all right. Well,
okay, good.
Blah blah blah. How's that?
Good. Yeah. Okay. These headphones are my they're my zero. I can't hear anything. They're for my drumming. So that's all I had. They broke right when I put them on. Then the blue screen came on, decided to reset. So I apologize.
No big deal. So Buick Smith says, ever played car video games that have the ghost car so you lap times get faster? What if bracket racing where you have to break out every time or you are out and your dial-in goes down each time? It wouldn't always be that way because it's all based on reaction time too.
Yeah.
Reaction time is a big factor in there. So generally what you find, somebody who's a novice at bracket racing, they may run dead on their dial. But if they take a nap on the line, when their green light comes on, that clock is running, right? So however long it takes them to break that beam, I mean, that time's just adding up. So you can literally run on the same dial in every time, but you just have a better reaction time each time.
Yeah. Hey, did you talk to them about what we're going to be talking about today? What our topic of discussion?
No. I just got the whole ball rolling when you popped in here. I said, I think Shane will be in here in just a minute, and boom, you were there.
Oh, awesome. So I have what we're going to be talking about today. Later on, we're going to be talking about rods, difference between, I brought in some examples, H-beams, I-beams, and what an X-beam is. I brought that in. And we're going to go over rod bolt technology. So, yeah, there's been a lot of questions about rods.
I'm glad you have that topic because you know what I was going to bring up?
What's that?
Rod to stroke ratio and bore to stroke ratio. Which one is ideal? Why?
Awesome. Well, that works out. So, yeah, those are our topics for today. So if you guys got questions about that, throw them out there.
Well, so Clint, who has been welding all day, says PSA: don't Weld all day in shorts with white pasty legs. He's itching like mad.
Yeah. When I welded
So
that whole rear end for the 68 Dart, when I first started my channel, like trying to get 500 subs, I welded the whole back brace on that thing, and it stained my legs so bad. It took it almost a month for it to change back to being a regular color other than black. It was terrible. It burned so bad.
huh. Well, I usually get burned on my arms and my face. Well, not so much my face, my neck. My neck gets
Oh,
burned the most.
I got a big welding jacket, so
I wouldn't wear that sucker, not especially not in the South. No way, you'd die. You could probably wear that thing in the
AC.
winter and sweat.
AC.
Yeah, I don't have that. Okay, let's see. Mostly old parts. Patrick says, hey Clint, I usually weld in shorts, Crocs, and no shirt.
That's a man.
Let's see. SSR Performance says that's good at like all the bore and all the stroke.
Yeah.
So that's the ideal bore to stroke ratio, all of it. Let's see. So I guess to kick this whole thing off, I mean, it's been a couple of weeks, so I'm already a little bit rusty, but so Clint's welding, and I don't know if he's told anybody what's going on, but Clint and I kind of collaborated on something. I've had a Buick 300. I got a lot of Buick 300 parts, and I had enough stuff to assemble a 64 300 with aluminum heads and aluminum intake manifold. And I figured, hey, Clint needs some content for his S10, and I've always wanted to put a 300 Buick in an S10. So let's see if Clint's down for it. And yeah, he was down for it. So I'm putting together a 300 Buick, and Clint is getting ready to fit it in his S10. So, and we're going to put 700 R4 on it and a carburetor and see how a brand X V8 in an S10 works out.
I've got a whole bunch of parts I'm going to be donating too. Yeah.
It's been a community effort so far. So
awesome.
We're all helping each other out to help Clint.
Yeah.
So I thought that was kind of cool.
Do you think he's going to make it to the No Name this year?
I hope so. And this is what this project was planned for. And he's been killing it. He's been really working for it like big time all week. He's been cutting it. He just sent me pictures today where he cut the cross member in there to allow he wanted the 300 Buick pan to fit so that he could actually graft a 350 Buick pan on the back and then have essentially like 3 or 4 more quarts of oil. He thought that would be pretty neat. So he's starting to get into the Buick vibe like I do, where it's like, you know, the world is your oyster because the oil pump is not in the pan.
Right.
Yeah. So he's digging on it.
That's good. That's another reason why I like the Slant 6 too. The oil pump's on the side of the block.
Let's see. Danny Boyd saying 300 turbo Buick in the S10. I think right now he's just going to go for the 300 running in the S10, and then
moving under its own power S10,
and then it goes from there. So anything that you guys can do to help Clint out, just hit him up from Clint Street Machines. This guy right here. So he says, mucho kudos for all the help. Yeah, we're going to get there, buddy, and we're going to make it to where you get to the No Name Nationals.
Yeah. Oh, and I got all the parts for the carburetor too, by the way. So that'll be done this weekend. So
yeah. Well, so Michael Schmidt, previously I'd prefer to smoke both, but I'd go with just tires.
Yeah. Well, congratulations, Dallas. I didn't know you were going to quit smoking. That's
I'm
awesome.
trying, man. I need to quit. It's just now I'm past all this. Well, I'm not past. I'm to the point where I just don't give a crap about this divorce stuff anymore. And it's like, I need to get life back on track. And I had quit before that whole thing started. And then when it started, it was like, oh, chain smoking. So now I just need to get back to being normal. So
yeah.
SSR Performance says the born stroke theory has changed a whole lot in the last 10 to 15 years. We finally have crazy heads to feed everything you can throw at it, and then some.
Yes.
This was something that was never even really considered like in the 90s. Well, maybe it was by the high-end race teams and stuff, but like regular people like us, you never ever considered it because most of the time you couldn't change to born stroke, and it was just not cost effective to do that.
I was a Mopar guy, so he had like W2 heads or Indy, or no, you didn't have Indy. You had just the Edelbrock heads, and then they came out with in the 2000s the 4-inch stroke. So literally that was it. It's a 4-inch stroke. Had a 4040 bore, and you had W2 heads or W5s. That was it.
Well, I was into small block Fords at that time, and they had like plenty of parts, right?
Yeah.
But the Buick stuff, it was like you're stuck with factory castings, and I don't mean like good W2 stuff. I mean like LeSabre stuff, right? So Riviera stuff.
Yeah.
So that's about the extent of what you had. Okay.
That's fun.
Mostly old parts and rust. Patrick says I'll be welding on Friday, getting my new Nicky Bobby Caltrack brackets in for a lower shock mount so I can get longer new triple adjustable Viking shocks.
Nice.
Dang, how much are you going to be hitting this thing with at the No Name Nationals? Wasn't it the 318 with the turbo on it? Has he stepped it up? It sounds like he may have because he has traction issues now. But yeah. Well,
that's one thing I can say that I've actually now I'm going to jinx myself. I'll knock on wood, but I've been able to hit it with everything I've had and with my setup, and it just seems to take it so far.
Yeah, well, I'm glad. Don't beat on it. Don't abuse it.
No, I'm not. I'm just tuning right now. I'm not really hurting it. I'm bringing it in easy. I'm getting it ready. So I have a run button. I have a get down the track, and then I have a kill button.
So Did Pedal Motor says Clint put a draw through turbo on it. To tell you the truth, this thing is about as close as you're going to get to something simple, like it'd be like a V8 version of a Grand National. I was doing that turbocharged 350 Buick for a while, and I ended up just putting it back to stock and sold the engine because I needed the cash for divorce purposes. And so there is an easy way to do it. I made spacers for a 300 to fit a 215 intake manifold, and you can actually pick up a Rover 4-liter intake manifold, which has the exact same port size as the aluminum heads we're using on Clint's 300, and it would literally just match right up. And then you could put you could cut the throttle body off of it because it's got some funky, weird English throttle body, and then put an LS throttle body on it in flange, and then run Holley EFI for a Buick small block. And he could, I mean, this thing's only going to have like 9-to-1 compression with aluminum heads, so it'll run on dang near cat urine squeezings. Yeah, I think he could definitely throw a turbo at it, and it would be one hell of a monster.
Yeah.
Let's see. Okay. What does this say? Levi's backyard performance. I have a steam makener happener to donate once it's running, Clint.
Oh, he means a turbo.
Oh, okay. All right. Is that like new car lingo I'm just not privy to?
I just kind of put it together. Like someone like hey, we'll put the steam to it or whatever.
All right.
Yeah.
Well, that's cool.
Yeah.
Maybe Clint can throw a turbo at this thing. I don't know. Just 300 Buick stuff is awfully few and far between, right? But here's the neat thing: is let's say you go get the turbo set up off of a Grand National, and you just use stock stuff. You're 3/4 of the way there. Right?
Yeah.
You literally got to fabricate one pipe out of each side, and then voila, you have everything you need. The cool thing is about the 300 also is that the bracket assemblies for the V6 Buick bolt right up to the front, so you can use the entire accessory drive off of a Grand National and hang the turbo where it normally goes from the factory in the whole 9 yards, including intercooler and the fan and all that stuff that bolts to the crank.
Yeah.
So. Okay, Michael Schmidt's saying, tell us what you need, Clint. So Clint, you better get on it, start making a list.
Well, we should by next week we'll put a list out there because I'll know what I have, you'll know what you have, and then we'll just put out whatever we're missing.
Okay, well, we're just about there, I think, already right now.
Yeah, but there's going to be little nickel and dime, knick-knack paddywhack shit we're going to need. All the little nickel and dime stuff. That'd be kind of cool.
Look what Clint put here. He says, all I can think of now is I need some hard-ass tires for the burnout contest. I also need a tunnel ram for a Buick 300.
What the fuck?
like they don't even make one, so problem solved.
Well, we could make one.
No, I'm not out of anything that's going to be affordable.
A single plane with just, like the High and Mighty. Remember the little rubber
Oh
hoses?
yeah, well you could do that. Yeah.
Just cut the thing, put the ports in there. It's from square to circular. Then run the rubber hose up to a bottom plenum. Mount 2 600s up there and let her eat.
Well, I had to clue everybody in on something cool. I found a Hillborn that'll fit a Buick 300. So, but that thing would be the ideal thing to start with and make your high and mighty intake manifold. But Danny Boyd says the EFI would be so cool. Let's see. Mostly old parts. Ron Ward is here. Says a new pair of Edelbrock aluminum big block Mopar heads are only a couple $100 more than the price of properly rebuilt 906s or 452s.
He's exactly right. And that's why it just makes sense nowadays to go with the aluminum head. Plus, you can gain another point of compression. Plus, you have all that extra head flow. You got just better everything.
Fabrice Mon Repeat says cat urine squeezing instant. Isn't that 97 or 87 octane? Yes, that's correct. Well, so Dead Pedal Motor says a lot of names for turbos. Wu-Tang War Whistle may be my favorite.
Yeah, I like that one too.
I had one that was like what was it? Like the Ching Ching Whirly Boy or something like that. I don't know.
Yeah, I've heard a few of them too. Yeah, like But the Wu-Tang War Whistle, I like that one. That one I've heard before. I like that one.
Okay, so Levi says, honestly, my S480 would be a good for that cubic inch motor. It probably, I'm telling you, man, it's just like it is the exact same engine as the Grand National, except for it's a V8 version. It would eat up every bit of that S480. And it probably would be like you guys would be scared of it because it's just virtually, it is the same engine as the Grand National had. And you just feed it some boost, right? And it's happy.
Keep feeding it more and more and more, right?
Yeah. So Buick Smith says, Doubts, are you guys using the Rover heads on Clint's 300? No, it just so happens that when Clint and I came up with this idea that we were kicking it around, I pulled the Rover heads out and I ended up freaking out that they don't close off the water passage, holes in the head, or like where the head bolts on. They actually leave them open. And I ended up calling Professor Pete. I'm like, man, you think I should ream them and put a plug in them or drill them and put a plug in? He was like, yeah, ream them and put a plug in them. And the more and more I looked at it, the more and more stuff didn't work easily. It was like you'd have to hold them side by side and you could see that the China rails on the block were in further, and on the 300 heads, they got an angle on the back of the head where it bolts on. But the Rover, because it was only on the 215, it didn't have the China rails, and it just had a straight line like this. And you would have had to fill it in with epoxy or weld it and then mill it. And so what we did do is I had the 300 heads. They had a bunch of gack valves that were burnt and stuff like that in them. And we pulled the valves out of the Rover heads and measured them, and they're the exact same size as the 300 head. The valves in them are. But here's what was neat is they were stainless steel, swirl polished, and back cut. And so these heads are going to gain probably 20% more flow.
Yeah, that's more power.
Yeah. And so we're doing this on the El Cheapo. We even had a cam to put in it. And then I got a set of lifters for it. And come to find out, the lifter manufacturer changed over from made in the USA to made in the Wu-Tang War Whistle noise land.
The Nagasaki Noisy Boy.
Yes, Nagasaki Noisy Boy.
That's a good one. I like that one too.
Oh, let's see. All right, mostly old parts and runs. Anybody in the market for a nice front engine dragster to race 2 heck Jeffs with? I'd love to have one, and I'd love to have an altered, and I'd race Jeff no problem.
What's he going to be running? Well, what do you think of time? Has he?
I don't know. It could easily be the. Oh yeah, it's 408 cubic inch small block Chevrolet and a front engine dragster. I'm assuming it'll probably run 5s, if not
4s.
I'd probably say it's going to be in the 5 somewhere. I can't see it breaking out of the 5s, but
Yeah, depends on where we're at. If it's close, I'll call them out. Why not? That'd be fun.
I think it's cool. I'd love to race them,
Me
just
too.
because I like nostalgia stuff like that.
Yeah. And just go at that point in instant green because you're either going to get it or not.
Yeah. Yep. Let's see. John Wilburn says, remember the movie Leap of Faith where the tent revival preacher was dared to sneak some odd word into each sermon? He worked aluminum siding into a sermon. Ron Ward needs to use Wu-Tang war whistle
Right.
at the No Name Nationals.
I remember the movie, yes, and in fact, we used to do that when I was a parts jockey. We used to come up with the word of the day, and we had to at least say that in our sentence that we were telling people, so because of this movie, because we loved it so much. So yeah, John, good pull. Yes, I love that.
So Buick Smith says, if most of the power comes in the first 80 degrees of ignition, would a short rod always make more power? Okay,
Torque.
so this leads into what the topics of discussion were tonight. And Shane was going to discuss the types of rods and the purpose and the use of them.
Yep.
And then we were going to talk about rod to stroke and bore to stroke ratio, which one is ideal and why. But so Buick Smith is saying, if most of the power comes in the first 80 degrees after ignition, would a short rod always make more power? And the short rod, okay, there's benefits to the short rod and there's downfalls to the short rod, just like anything, right? You have to figure out what you're trying to accomplish is what you determine which rod to use.
I always tell people there's no free lunch. You're going to rob Paul to pay Peter. It's either going to go torque and horsepower. This is going to go down torque. Horsepower is going to go up, or you're going to go like this. It only makes so much power. It's just where is it going to make that power at? That's all you're really trying to do.
So when you do a short rod like that, yes, most of your power comes in the first 80 degrees after ignition. And if you talk to David Vizard, he'll tell you that the degradation of the explosion is exponential. And the more time that it spins, or that your piston is traveling downward, the more energy that's lost over a shorter distance. Okay. And in theory, you would think the shorter rod would make more power because it's more angular. And then in the first 80 degrees, it's going to have more rotation on the crank because the piston speed is on a shorter rod considerably faster, right? But what does happen, and Shane will show you, is it side loads that rod so bad that it actually loses friction. And that's where you get blocks. Like if you've had small block Chevrolets with a 4-inch bore and a 3.5-inch stroke, or 3.48-inch stroke, if you want to get technical, they side load the piston so bad that they actually taper the bores really horribly. And it's the same way on anything that has a short stroke, short rod combination like that. Not necessarily always the short stroke, but the short rod always definitely side loads the rod considerably more.
Yeah.
So that's where the friction coefficient goes up because it's actually digging into the side of the block and the cylinder bore, and you lose power because of the short rod. But
also too, it's piston speed too. In the middle, you're going to have a higher piston speed there. So there's a lot more friction associated with that. It still travels the same distance and at the relative time, but it's the actual acceleration rate in the middle as it pulls away. That's the highest. That's what you're losing is in frictional force, and also to side loading.
Right. So also the other factor is like, okay, so that's what I guess one thing we should talk about short rods and long rods. Short rods, like he just said, has a higher piston. Essentially, it's like velocity in the middle of the stroke. Okay. The longer rod has the higher velocity at the bottom and at the top. Bottom dead center and top dead center is where it has the highest velocity. And that's why if you ever had a long rod engine, even if it's same compression ratio as a short rod engine, they have detonation. And it's more prone to detonation. And that's because all of the speed occurs at top dead center or bottom dead center. Right. Yeah. And then the short rod.
And under power stroke, it's moving away from the cylinder at a slower rate. So as the flame kernel, goes across the piston, it's trying to advance, but that piston is not accelerating at the same rate as a shorter rod would be as it's coming away. But the longer rod will carry the power out longer than the shorter rod will.
Yep. And so here's the upside of the short rod. There's a few upsides. Generally, when you're talking shorter rod, it's generally lighter weight, so it allows it to rev quicker. The shorter rod is generally stronger because it's spanning less distance. The shorter rod, well, generally, what you'll find is the engine with the longer stroke and a shorter rod will tend to make more torque. And just because the leverage that it has and the velocity that it has in the middle of the stroke, right? So that is the benefits of the short rod. The downside of the short rod is they don't like to rev. The rod to stroke ratio actually it works. The closer you can get to 2-to-1, the faster the engine revs, because the rod angularity is almost straight up and down at that point when you're 2-to-1, right? So all power is being directed downward and then and upward.
But he's talking about really high RPMs when he's talking about 2-to-1. When we're talking about RPMs that we would see, I always try to tell people that 5.0 number, you want to stay above the 5.0 number as far as your rod to stroke ratio. Closer to 1.7 if you're going to be, like, say, getting up to the 7,000 RPM range. But if you're going to be below that, but you want all the benefits of having, let's just call it the less detonation and building the mid-range torque, 1.5 rod to stroke ratio for most purposes is going to be fine.
Right.
Sorry,
Well, no. The 1.5 to 1 rod to stroke ratio is ideal for a street engine because you're trying to build torque and you're trying to build load and mid-range torque. And so that's ideal. You put the long rod in there and they generally won't build as much torque, but they like to rev more. And so that's more like a drag race application. So it depends what you're trying to do with the engine, and that's what you have to identify. And now I know there's a bunch of people out there now going, oh, dang, I got a 383 with a 5.7 rod in it for my Chevrolet, and my rod to stroke ratio is horrible. Well, yes, it is, but it makes good torque, right? So there is some gains to it. Let's see. Okay. And that covers rod to stroke ratio. So generally what you're trying to get to a 2-to-1 for a drag race application. And then, like Shane was saying, a 1.5 to 1 would be ideal for the street. You want to have something that has a short rod to stroke ratio for something for the street. If you're in a towing application, short rod all day long, right? Because it's less prone to detonation and it makes more low to mid-range torque. But you are going to have severe block wear. And if you really wanted to see that in practical terms, if you remember the 347 stroker kits for the 302 Fords in about 1999 to 2002, all those stroker kits, you knew if somebody had a 302 that was stroked to a 347 because they'd pull into the car meet and it'd be smoking like mad. And you're like, what's going on there? Oh man, just a stock 302, lots of nitrous, and it's like, it's because the bore was so tapered after that thing ran for about 11 seconds that it couldn't ring seal at the bottom of the bore.
Somebody put in the chat here, so a 5-inch bore with a 3.5-inch stroke, rev to 9 grand? No, because of weight. You're defeating the whole purpose then at that point of having, a big bore, shorter stroke, because now you have a ton of weight with that 5-inch bore.
Well, there is. So a 5-inch bore is really heavy. If you look at the ratio of that, where whatever the ratio is from 5 to 3.5, okay, that would probably be a very close ratio to what they run in like Formula One. Okay, but they run a considerably smaller bore and a considerably shorter stroke than that for the purpose of winding them up to 16 to 20,000 RPM. That's the whole idea. So, okay.
And Ron basically has said what I've been saying this whole time since I've ever been on this live Tech Talk. the 400 Mopar big block, which is the shorter deck, is the ideal engine, and that's what I was running for the longest time. They were getting harder to find, and that's actually why I stepped down to the small blocks, because I could find them in the wrecking yard. But yeah, he's actually 3 more down from that one. But yeah, it's basically it's a great rod to stroke ratio. It's a great bore to stroke ratio. Horribly expensive aftermarket piston. So he's exactly right. That was the main reason why in the 90s and the early 2000s why I switched from the 400 to the 360. And what was that reason right there. Now the 400, I could actually RPM the 400. I could more than I could with the 360. I actually lost about 1,000 RPM by going the 400. I could easily take to 7,500 RPM with pretty much factory stuff if it was balanced right. 360, 6,500 until I figured out the oiling before I started throwing cranks out the bottom.
So, yeah. Well, Clayton's toolbox is saying here 425 Olds is 4,126 bore and 3,975 stroke with a 7-inch long rod. And I love the odd combinations that the American auto manufacturers have tried to make over the years, where they refine. The 425 Olds, just like my Buick stuff, just like Shane Slant 6 stuff, they're like literally oxymorons, because it'll have a really long rod, which is very supportive of high RPM. And then they put a main bearing in them that's like 3.5-inch main bearing, which is the opposite of what you're trying to achieve with that long rod.
Cylinder head.
Yeah. And it was always like these weird things that nobody really thought of, like, oh, that really long rod will make up all that deck height. We'll be good. Or you could have just put more stroke in the sucker and shorten the rod.
Yeah, make a head that floats something over 140 CFM.
Well, have you ever seen the heads for an Oldsmobile?
Yeah, oh yeah.
They look like a Cleveland 4-barrel head. They got to flow, but it has to happen at like 4,500 RPM on up. And by that point, your Oldsmobile's already spit the crank out of the bottom, because it's got 3.5-inch main bearing and a 7-inch long rod and a damn near 4-inch long stroke.
Yeah, I've seen a few little blocks. Now, I've only seen a few Olds blocks, but they seemed flimsy, at least the ones I looked at.
No, that's what your DRCE engine is based off of, is the Oldsmobile.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
Warren Johnson pretty much just chiseled the internals out and then put big block Chevrolet stuff in.
Oh, I gotcha.
So
maybe that's what I saw. It was actually at Crower when I saw the Olds block. So it's probably one of those, because it looked like it was just like it looked like it was hacked up. So that could be.
And Dizzy Izzy says, thanks, fellas. Don't ask, don't learn. Hey, man, that's what this is all about.
Yeah, no problem.
So Schweers and Gears says, I went with a 6-inch long rod in my 377 small block Chevrolet with a 3.5-inch crank and a 400 small block for all the revs. Smokey Unique said, longest rod you can fit. So I went for it. I figured my low first gear in the 700 R4 will compensate. It will. That'll be a great combination. There's always a lot of long rod 377s running around at the drag strip, even in the 80s and 90s, because it's a good combo and they like to rev, man.
Yeah, and what Smokey was talking about is because drag racing, you're only worried about the top 1,000 RPM. You don't care about anything beyond. If the max RPM is 7,500, you only care from 6,000 up. That's all you care about.
Well, the Grumpy Jenkins liked to use the 5.825-inch long rod that came in like 2 to 3 or whatever, the early stuff, right? Instead of that 5.7 rod. And then he would pair that with the 3-inch stroke crank and get as close as he could to 2 to 1 for a rod to stroke ratio.
Yeah.
That's where the magic was to happen. And like, I'm not going to say what I'm working on right now. I got a couple things coming up for this fall, and this winter should be really, really cool with the stuff I'm working on. But I'm having to build up a nest egg to put the stuff together. And one of them is a small block Chevrolet, believe it or not. So
I'm actually working on a Slant 6 for Plan Z, man.
Sweet.
Yes.
Yeah. So what are you going to turbo this one, or just
this one is actually, this is going to be the everyday engine, the everyday man's engine. This is going to be, because I always like to do that. Like, I'll build one on the side that's going to have all the wing ding, the what is it, the Nagasaki warrior, whatever
war whistle.
The war whistle. But here's the thing: is that I always like to build it at least one that everybody can build. This is going to have, the stock block but milled. This is going to have the stock rod but balanced, the stock piston but all fitted. Everything going to be blueprinted. It's going to be decked. It's going to be 11.5 to 1. It's going to have whatever you can do in your own shop for the head, and run whatever carburation I can have, and make it work. So this is going to be what any one of you guys could actually build. I'll build something, on the side. And the whole idea is just, what can this car do with factory parts and, the cheese whiz, hole saw that went crazy out there. And just, I'll weigh the car with me in it. We'll get an estimated power, and then we'll run it. And then I'm going to start changing gear ratios, like the transmission. I will run the 245, and then I have a 277. Then I will change it. I got an extra set of Caltrax. I'll put Caltrax on it. I'll take all my, really bitchin' internals for my 904 and put it into a Slant 6, and I'll put it in that thing, and I'll even have a trans brake on it, and we'll just see what it can do. Like, what can I do with this car, with this engine, while I'm building something else, and then just play with camshafts. I mean, I do work for, Edelbrock, so, comp cams there, so I can make whatever cam I want. And then this way I can, just keep RPMing it until it just really doesn't anymore. And then the next engine is probably going to be a long rod with a 2.2 piston, like a Wiseco style piston.
Right.
And so that way I can try to get that 6,500 RPM NA, and then we're gonna put the boost to it, or maybe even some juice. We'll put the dope to it first, and then we'll put some boost to it. We'll see what happens.
Yeah, well, I do know for a fact the Slant 6 club that's running around the Midwest, when they spray them, they come alive.
Oh yeah,
that motor loves spray. Ron Ward says mostly, oh my gosh. Ron Ward says, take a look at the Philpro Performance Gaskets catalog: Buick, Chevy, Pontiac, AMC, Ford, but no products for Oldsmobile listed. Right. Oldsmobile has always had a tough break. I mean, they had good stuff. In 66, they had a tri-power set up on it, like if you got a W30 Oldsmobile 442, you had a tri-power set up on that 400, and they were pretty healthy. They also had a killer small block. Oldsmobile has the best small block, in my opinion. They had one called the Ramrod 350.
Really? It was called the Ramrod?
That's
real?
Exactly what it was called. No shit. Wow. It was called the Ramrod 350. And it was a W31 package, and they were rumored to be above 400 horse and only 350 cubes. So that's a big deal.
I know the W31. I know that moniker. I just didn't know it was called Ramrod 350.
That's what it was called. That was the moniker on the actual front of the fender. It said Ramrod with a V8 symbol.
Oh, okay, cool.
Yep. Let's see. Buick Smith says, if my numbers are correct, stock Buick 1.75 rod ratio, 350 is a 148 rod ratio, and 455 is a 169 rod ratio. Yes, but and this is something I played with, and this is why I'm giving essentially Clint an engine, because I got tired of all the numbers in my head and me willing to spend thousands of dollars to make a 300 do this. But if you use the 350 Buick rod and you bush the rod in, or the wrist pin in on it down to a 905 wrist pin and make it a full floater, you use a later 3800 piston and out of like a series 2 3800, and you bore that 300 Buick 50 over. Now it becomes 308 cubic inch, and it has the long rod in it. That's a 191 rod ratio using a Buick 350 rod. So that would have been a pretty healthy street machine. Plus, if you use the series 2 piston, it's got the thin rings on it, the metric 1.2 millimeter rings. So I think it'd be a pretty healthy little 300. Okay, Bluegate Garage says, any updates? Oh, speaking of factory parts, any update on the coated flat TEPA hydraulic lifters are coming out for small block Fords?
No comment. I told you guys when they're ready to go, that's the only time I can really comment on them. Or I actually can't even comment on them, because if it's coming out at a certain time,
but they're still coming, right?
They're still coming.
Okay, well then hold your breath, guys. They're still coming. They will be here.
All I can tell you is that everything, when it comes to the parts land, especially in the aftermarket, just getting metals nowadays, that is the hardest thing possible. I've been waiting forever for. We released that that 4L60E to small block Ford at PRI and SEMA. We haven't even been able to put them on the shelf yet because we're just waiting on the flex plates. So, I mean, we're still waiting on that. And that's a done project. So, yeah, it just is what it is.
And Clayton's Toolbox says on the big block Oldsmobile, you can turn the rod journals down to big block Chevy size and use big block Chevy rods. Yes.
Yeah. That's actually really kind of common.
Yeah, a lot of people do that. Matter of fact, there's probably a combo for the Oldsmobile where you can turn them down and use a Chevrolet small block.
Yep.
But let's see. Michael Schmidt says Hastings Rings is discontinued rings for certain makes and sizes.
It's true.
This is not a surprise.
We talk about this almost every morning.
Here's the thing. They stopped making Buick 350 main bearings a year ago. They stopped making Slant 6. That's what Shane and I talk about. They stopped making Slant 6 main bearings. Slant 6. Probably like the most mass-produced Mopar engine on the planet.
You know, speaking of which, I got to stop you real quick. I did go to Rock Auto today, and they do have some main bearings in stock.
Oh, okay. Maybe I'm wrong.
Yeah. So, but it's some. It's not like Clevite. It's not Speed Pro. It's a King, right? But then the rod bearings, there's tons of them. But for the main bearings, that's what they got. So it's just. But for almost 2 years there was a dry spell where you couldn't even get a main bearing for a Slant 6. You were buying them on eBay, new old stock.
Yeah. And see, I ran into that this week. And I'll have a video coming out because I've figured out what I'm going to do. I'm going to take lemons and make it into lemonade. I've been using a lifter from a known lifter company that had made in the USA lifters for Buicks. And if you have the early Buick stuff, 67 and before, or actually 69 and before, they have no oil hole in the top of the lifter to feed the push rod because in the Buick in the 69 and before era, they feed through the head. And then it runs through the rocker arms and down the push rods. It feeds backwards, right, from the head down. And I've been using those lifters for I guess probably 4 years now. And one day they just disappeared off of Amazon. They're not available any longer. Like, oh, wow. Well, I took the part number and I went over to my favorite place to look for obsolete stuff. Go into eBay, type in the part number, and bang, I pull up some lifters. I order them. And surprise, surprise, the box I get, it looks exactly the same, but the sticker says made in China. And I pull the lifter out and it physically looks different. Right. And I'm like, oh, now I got 2 boxes of these things that I don't know what I'm going to do. But I came up with a plan. So what I am going to do is I know they're made in China. It says on the box. I'm going to put them in an engine because I've been kind of teetering on what I wanted to do. And because I was going to use them in my What If 300, I was going to use set in Clint's 300 Buick. And then I'm like, no, I don't want to do that because it'll ruin the stuff if they fail, right? And then you lose the cam, you lose all the stuff. So I'm going to take the Mule 300. I'm going to run it at the dyno, and I'm going to get everything out of it that I can get out of it. And then I'm going to pull the cam. I'm going to swap the cam, and I'll put a cam in there, that I can wipe. And if it loses it, the whole motor needs to be rebuilt anyway. So we might as well see if they'll break it in. If it breaks them in, hey, great.
Instead of a will it survive video?
Right? Will it survive? Yeah. I mean, and I'm going to put oil in it. I'm going to put, but
give it all a chance.
I was doing was I got 2 sets of them, right? So I could run one in without breaking oil using say the Castrol high zinc stuff that they sell at Walmart. And then the other one I can use just Rotella T and see if I can break that in. And if it fails, it fails. What do you got to lose, right?
Right. Yeah. I like those will it survive. You give it all the chance in the world, but hey, look, will it survive?
Let's see.
Buick Smith's asking a question here at 742.
This one here?
Yeah, but we'll get to that. We're going to talk about that Buick Smith after 8 o'clock. We'll shift gears into rods and whatnot. So we'll get to that. So hang out.
So Ron Ward brings up a thing here, mostly old parts. And he says, I thought it was common knowledge RB Mopars love Honda rod bearings. Everything loves Honda rod bearings because the smaller the rod journal. Now, okay, I can't say that for sure.
stroke because of
when the
overlap.
stroke, when the overlap is gone and you
Yeah.
cut the rod journal down that far, they don't love it. They come apart. But stuff that has short strokes, say like, okay, the one that comes to mind is in the Oldsmobile. We were talking about Oldsmobiles. The Oldsmobile small block. Every small block has the same stroke. They're all like 3.9 or no, I'm sorry, 3.39 something. It's like a 3.4 inch stroke. You could easily take some of those, especially if you had like a 330 main or a 330 crank, because they're steel, and you can put them in like a 403 or a 350 olds, and all you do is offset grind that crank. You could pull some stroke out of it, or you could just cut it down. Here's what I found was interesting. If you turn a crank 1010, it costs the same amount as if you turn a crank 10 and 125, right? Yeah. And offset ground. It's the same price.
Exactly. Yep.
So start thinking in those terms, if you can get bearings for it.
Yeah.
Let's see. Buick Smith says, Dallas, did you tell me once that the 300 uses the same bearings as the 225 odd and early fire 231 even fire V6? These are the same main bearing size. Yeah. Not rod bearing, but the main bearing size is the same. Let's see. Most of the old parts and rust. Patrick says, I've heard that some of the new bearings are not USA made and they delaminate. So most people are using King bearings.
Yeah.
Huh.
Yeah, I've actually noticed that on my last couple engines. I've always been a Clevite. I've always had good luck with Clevites. It got to the point where you had to buy 4 Clevite bearings to get one set. You had to buy 4 sets to get one set that would actually work correctly. And when that happened, I've been looking for other manufacturers. Now, luckily, in the Cookie Monster, those bearings were still Clevites H's, but that was, that was back when they were still, I had extra sets sitting around. So luckily I got them at that point. I don't know what I would do now,
Let's see. Danny Boyd saying Dallas don't use an HEI distributor. Why is that?
I love HEIs, man.
Yeah, me too.
Super simple. It's awesome. And it works.
Yeah. In the 90s, that was kind of the ticket. It was, you would buy an 80s car. Yep. And even if they had the computer controlled quadrijet off, you'd take it off and throw it in any particular direction. And then you would just put an older model quadrijet on it that fit on that engine, and then put a regular HEI distributor in it, and they'd run for like 100,000 miles.
Yeah. You could buy an HEI distributor without the cap on it. So you would just take your cap, but it had all the stuff on it, but it had everything. It was $55. And then you could buy like the, O'Reilly's, or actually it was Kragen at that point, had that performance section. You can get the Excel coil, Nixel, everything, put it all in there.
Yeah.
You could do an awesome tune-up for under $100. That was the hot ticket. I love that.
HEI distributor was like, if you were running a GM, that was like the go-to.
Yeah. Right. I've run HEI modules to this day because as long as your grounds, as long as you have a good heat sink, as long as you have great grease on there, transfer, you don't have any issues. I've only had one module go bad, and it was my fault because the bolt came loose for where it was grounding out.
I had, I've only had one module go like bad. And I'll tell you what, it was a Davis Unified, a DUI.
Yeah.
Yeah. And here's the sad part. I used it right out of the package and put it in there and already had grease on the bottom. And so I don't know. I literally drove 7 miles and then it was like, pow. And it just died going down the road. I'm like, what in the world? And I went and got my tried and true 1974 module and slid it in there, and still going today. So I don't know. Let's see. Danny Boyd says that big block Oldsmobiles, you know what? I should have asked this question. Shane Dallas, I thought, what if you have the Chinesium lifters nitrided? I don't know if that's what's wrong with them at all.
No.
I guess if you DLC them.
Yeah, because the whole idea is that you nitrate the camshaft because you want it to transfer and you percorize them too. I mean, there's a couple different things you can do, but on the lifters, you want it to transfer some material back and forth. That's actually how they polish in. You want them to, if you nitrate them, I mean, yeah, you could, but you really want to have them polished. That's really what you want. Yeah, I don't know.
So mostly old parts says still sitting on my stash of TRW bearings from the late 70s.
Exactly.
If you guys haven't figured it out, the window is closing on your older V8 stuff where you can't get repair parts. You need to get over to eBay, buy up your favorite Mopar, General Motors, Ford stuff, and get that NOS stuff, squirrel it away, and make sure you got enough crap to live out the downfall of society. So I don't know. And then Danny Boyd asks, how hard is it to make bearings? It's actually pretty damn hard.
Yeah.
Because
there's
it's
multi-layers to them, and
it's kind of like the process where you chrome something.
Yeah.
It's literally like you take a steel tube and then you laminate all that stuff and then cut it open, and you have to machine it to an exact tolerance. And it's probably pretty damn hard, I would assume, without screwing them up. I mean, I screw them up just by picking them up out of the package sometimes. So
Michael Schmidt's got that good question right there. Two down.
This one here.
Yep.
Shane, you bought 4 sets of bearing to mail one.
To make one, I think is what you meant to say.
Make one. What did you see that caused this? Inconsistent sizing?
Really what it is on a bearing, when you have a bearing and you're putting it into, like, say, a rod, you're going to have a point where the rod, where the bearing is being pushed together, you're going to have a crush, right? So you're going to have a length and then a thickness, and that basically, when you measure them here, they're going to be a thou tighter than they will be here. So when it's running, it's going to get a little push here, and it's going to bring these in. So what I was noticing is that the thickness was varying, especially in the crown, basically in the center of it, and then how long it was, and then just the actual finish on the actual surface, the tri-metal. So when I measure the bearing, I'm measuring them in 3 spots, because I'll measure the bore of the rod. Then I measure the thickness of the bearing in 3 spots on each side. Then I put it together, and then I torque it down, and then I measure that. And then what I'm doing is I'm measuring how much fall away it's got. So when I put it in there, is it a thou? Is it a thou and a half? Is it half a thou? So, in the 3 different spots. It just wasn't. It was just inconsistent. I would measure the bores in the rods, and then I put the bearings in them. And then when I would actually mic them, because of the crush, how long they were, it was giving me inconsistent sizing. So even though I knew that the bearing on the crank, they're within a tenth of a thousand, that's 0.00001, right? And I know that these were, within less than a tenth, of a thousandth. But then I was getting 1,000 difference, and what I was noticing was on the bearings. So I started scraping the bearings. You get a piece of glass, and you get sandpaper, and you grind them down, you cut them down, WD-40 or ATF, and then you can play with how much crush you would have. But it just to get a set of bearings was taking all day long just to fit bearings, where before I didn't have to do it all day. It was only a couple hour process. So I started buying multiple sets, so that way I could just
most of the time you'd be able to pull them out of the package, and they're almost perfect.
Yeah, exactly. Before I would only have to buy, I would buy 2. I mean, for real, I've always bought 2 sets of everything. And if I found 1 or 2, then I would put those back in there and I'd send them back. But it got to the point where I was having to buy 3, and then lately it was 4. When I did the Cookie Monster, I had on the rods, because they were a GM rod bearing, I had to have 4 sets of bearings to make one that I wanted to make them consistent. And I think I was at 2.7, so just under 3,000ths of clearance on all those, and they vary less than 1/10 of a thousandth all the way across. I was getting a thou 7, 2, and then 2.7, just because of the bearings. And I was changing tops and bottoms, and I wasn't even getting the X ones, like the ones that were a thou under. These are just the same bearings, and I was getting that inconsistent, almost a thou across the board. So that's the main reason why. It's really all of it. I think it's just the thickness. I think it's how long it was, and just the delamination. Like you could actually physically touch some of them, and that tri-metal would just flake right off, and you're just like, yeah, I'm not using that one.
Well, Danny Boyd says, don't use HEI for break-in. And I mean, remember the one that crapped out on live with Tony? Oh, yeah. So I'll tell you what, that one I ended up changing the module. I did a engine break-in with live on Tony. Like the very first tech talk that I think we did was a live engine break-in. And the HEI just took a dump. And I'm like, oh, no. The module failed. So I put a new module and it starts right up, and I run the rest of the break-in. Everything's good. Right. And then what I would do is like I would take that distributor out of an engine, or out of the engine I broke in, and then you put like a points distributor in, or whatever, like whatever they had, the person that was buying it. And I would keep that distributor, and I knew it was my known good.
Mm-hmm.
And a few months later, I put it in another 455 and it wouldn't start. And I troubleshot that thing for months. I could not figure out for the life of me. It was like it would work and then it wouldn't work. It would work and then it wouldn't work. It turned out to be the wiring harness on it. I had a break in the wire. And the only reason I found it was that I ended up cutting the pigtail off and running it to an external ignition box, and then run the wiring back to the distributor from the ignition box. And it would not run at all. And I'm like, what in the world was going on? I mean, I cut this, I soldered it. It doesn't make any sense. And lo and behold, you pull on it has 3 wires that come out and goes up to the top of the cap, which runs the coil, right, on HEI.
Yeah.
So, it's the power coming from the coil down to the ignition module is what it is. But either way, there was a brown, a red, and a black wire generally. And the red wire had separated at the not even a 1/4 inch inside the insulation. And so it would intermittently touch and everything would be fine and it would run just great. But then when you get it at a weird angle on Wednesday when the moon's coming up at 7:01, it wouldn't run. And it didn't make any sense because it was never consistent. And so that's what ended up being the problem there, though. Oh, and we just got some kind of super chat. All right.
We did.
So, yeah.
Oh, look at that.
Let's see if I can get back to. Okay. So Michael Schmidt says for modern day iced coffee at Starbucks after you find 3 sets of bearings is not enough. That is some BS. So Michael Schmidt sent you $10 for some modern day coffee and to stress relieve after some main bearing issues.
Right.
Yeah, or some just regular rod bearings. But thanks, Michael Schmidt. That's appreciated. Yeah.
Thank you.
Shane will get his coffee. I'm going out to see him here soon, so that'll be the case.
Yeah.
Let's see. Okay. Okay. Danny Boyd's saying, oh, wait, here we go. Michael Schmidt saying a Pertronics reliable if properly installed and long lasting. I can't speak on the behalf of it. I've never owned one. So I'm not going to, but they are made in my favorite owned place.
Here's the thing about the Pertronics. Okay. I've ran mini Pertronics, and just when you start to trust them, they fail. That's the thing. And it's really, it's kind of the person who's putting it in. I'll admit it. It's 2 pieces of plate steel that you're putting on there, and they give you a little piece of glass to get the Hall effect thing set up in there. But the way it's set up, it's not really super rigid, and it kind of is hokey. So if you're going to run a Pertronics, put a points distributor in the car with you. I didn't make that wise choice one time. And that was the whole reason why I was like, look, I'm going straight back to the HEI modules, and I've never had any problems in the Ford coils. And just get rid of the ballast resistor.
So Clint says, and Clint used to work at Glendale Speed in Glendale, California, right? He used to be the parts guy. He says, I can't say if it was user error or not, but we sold a lot of replacement modules for Pertronics in the 90s.
It comes loose. That's the biggest issue, is because it's a tapered screw that comes up with a bolt and a nut, and you never get it tight enough. Plus, it wiggles around at higher RPMs, and then it'll just shake itself loose. Even though they give you the blue Loctite, you put it on there, it's just going to come loose, and then it starts hitting that, and then the plastic wears, and then it's done. So that was the main reason.
So Fabrice Mon Repeat says, Dallas, I think you hit it on the head. The handful of bearings I've seen delaminated seem to be missing the dark layer between the babbitt and the copper.
Yeah, just delaminates, comes out in your hand.
Yeah. I don't, it is, you know what? I really think it is, because it works like the chroming process, right? And what's happened over the past 20 years? Well, the EPA has cracked down the chroming process facilities, right? And made it harder and harder and harder for them to do their job. I can see it being no different at a bearing manufacturing facility, right?
Yeah.
Because it's almost the same process, I think. And their requirements probably gotten stickier and stickier. And guess what? All of the there was one thing that you could count on when I was in the Navy, is that if the Navy had a rule, someone somewhere was fucking that rule up, right? Guaranteed. You're supposed to get paid on Thursday, you got paid on Saturday. You're supposed to have 3 hots and a cot, you got 2 hots and no cot, you know.
Right.
And it was they used to call it, you could fuck up a wet dream, and that's the Navy standard. That was the rule for it. And I can see no different when the government gets their hand involved in anything that they touch. It never turns out good. It never turns out. You ruin something that's a greatest intention ever and make it just garbage. So that's where I think a lot of they need to step back and let people just do their dang job and put tariffs on stuff that need to have tariffs on them.
Yeah, that's where you're going to gain the money back.
Yeah,
and bring the workforce back here again.
Yeah. Let's see. Buick Smith says, I got pulled over by a HP highway patrol the other day. He was sitting around the corner. I fired up the GS. He said he thought a bomb went off. Ha ha ha. Ended up just getting a warning. So he must have been driving that thing around with no exhaust on it. Let's see.
That's funny.
Let's see. So Danny Boyd says chroming is electrostatically done copper, nickel, and then chrome. That's correct. And generally what they'll do is they'll do multiple layers of copper to get the consistency on the material that they want, then the nickel, and then the nickel allows the chrome to adhere easily. That's the nickel is actually so interesting because you could literally chrome anything if you can get the nickel to stick to it.
Exactly. Yeah.
Okay. Okay. Michael Schmidt said something up here. Okay. I miss Glendale Speed. I live 2 miles north of the old Glendale Speed, which is and he said this Subaru dealer now, leaving no speed shops nearby.
Oh, it sucks.
Yeah.
Yeah. The last one in California. The last one in California was all the way in Carlsbad. That was the last one. It was the last speed shop.
No, JBA is still there.
Well, JBA, but at the time when they were killing it out, they were only Ford, but then they started bringing in other parts.
Right. Yeah, and I think that's because they had no one to compete against.
Exactly. Yeah.
Right. But they were in the right place at the right time, because JBA was literally a Ford speed shop, Ford only, and they were the ticket in the 90s.
Yeah.
When the 5-liter revolution happened. So I imagine they did pretty good.
Yeah.
Let's see. Danny Boyd says copper helps the nickel stick. Yes, it does. Yep. Let's see. Okay. Nickel makes the shine, and chrome is like a clear coat to lock it in. Oh, I did not know that.
Neither did I. I watched them do my bumpers on my 66 way back when. That was up there in Escondido at the plating place right there by the.
I'm sure that sucker's going.
Yeah. It was off of 15 and 72, whatever it was right there. And that was actually a process I really enjoyed watching. I thought it was cool.
Yeah. Well, let's see. Hey, it's an hour in. Did you want to talk about your rods?
Yeah, let's talk about our rods. So a while back we talked about regular and irregular forces and rods and rod designs, and we kind of went off on I beams and H beams, and then we were talking about K beams and so on and so forth. Someone sent an email asking, he didn't really understand what regular and irregular forces are in an engine, and why I said that the H beam is better for regular forces and the I beams are better for irregular forces. So what I did is I brought in some examples, and I also brought in one that kind of combines two. So this is an H beam rod. If you were to cut it right down the side, it would look like an H, hence the name. What this is good for, most people can run these in some low power applications, but mostly NA. And you can make these technically lighter because you can hollow them out in the side. And imagine how the strength of this happens is a 2x4. If you're trying to break a 2x4 on your curb, you stand it up on end, and you're trying to break it like this, you can't. It's harder, right? Than if you were to lay the 2x4 down like this and try to break it this way. So this would be an example of regular forces. So the piston is pushing down on this, and everything's in line, and this thing's going up and down, and all the force is being pushed on this side and this side as this is trying to twist like this, but it can't because this is the long edge. And on an NA engine, without any type of power adders, you're going to have a flame front. You're going to have probably 13-to-1 compression, so on and so forth. So the flame front's going to go across, and we're regular forces is if this is my piston, it's going to be pushing down. You're going to have some twisting, but you're going to be pushing down with a regular force. It's going to be
evenly.
Evenly.
Yeah.
So that's what these are for. These are usually going to be better than stock, and you can usually make them strong for lighter, and they work well. Something like that, good for 700, 800 horse in that range. Then you come up to the other one that you have is the I-beam, what everyone sees. So this is your standard I-beam. So these are a little better for irregular forces. And why is that? Is because when you're looking at it, remember the H-beam was good in this range because the 2x4 was put on this side, but now the 2x4 is now put this way. So what it's doing is irregular forces. So when you now have, like, say, nitrous or boost or anything like that, and then you say you have 11-to-1 compression, you have a lot of fuel in there, and you're putting 22 pounds of boost in there, the flame front that was normally just rocking like this now is massive. It's a massive type of irregular force. That's where these take up. And what happens with the I-beam, the strength on it is that it can take that, deflect, and then come back, where the H-beam is more rigid. It is technically stronger than this rod, but it's like a diamond. If you were to start to move this rod, they tend, not always, but they tend to break. They tend to crack. So that's why they're typically better for NA applications. An I-beam, this will be a heavier rod than this one. These are both for LS. And then this one right here is going to be a heavier rod, but it's going to take those irregular forces better. So there was an engineer before me, and we kind of came up with something a little different. Now this is not our boosted rod X beam, but this is considered our NA version of it. It's a lightweight. So an X beam is basically an X beam, just like that. And so it combines both the I-beam principle and the X-beam principle.
No, the
so
I-beam
you're basically
and the
getting
H-beam.
What's
I-beam
that?
and the H-beam.
Oh, I'm sorry. Yeah, I-beam, H-beam. Sorry about that. So yeah, so I cut this down so that way people can see it. But this is our lightweight. So the boosted version is thicker in here, and it's got and it comes in a little bit different on the I-beam. So that way you can run the force. And these typically are right in the middle. So it is not as heavy as this one, but not as light as this one, but it can take the same power as this one. So we rate these things at about, I think it was 1,400 horsepower is what these That's what these X beams are for. And then now I'm going to brag a little bit here. So we're moving away from ARP rod bolts. We're going to start using 0.1. You guys ever heard of them out there at a Zuri? You ever heard of them? Okay. 0.1 is like your new rod bolt that you should really be looking at. They're made in America, made right here. Everything's done in-house, all heat treating and so on and so forth. This is my rod bolt design. This is a 7/16 1/600 underhead. Basically what I was doing here is I was cutting down on the taper, because wherever you have a stress riser is where you're going to have fractures, and they're going to grow. And also too, I wanted something that was strong. And there was a question earlier about rod bolts. Now, here's the thing about rod bolts. Now, these are just what I've seen, and whatnot. There's always exceptions to these. There's always going to be outliers, but this is typically the rule. Whenever you have a boosted application and an RPM, you can usually get away with a little bit less of a rod bolt, because you're always going to have constant force on the rod. Whenever you're going to have problems on the rod bolt is when you're having on the overlap. So that would be, say, like your exhaust going your intake stroke. So whenever you obviously put a heavier rod in there and then a heavier piston, when it's going on the overlap, all the weight is on this, and it's basically on these two rod bolts, and they're technically springs at that point. They're held in tension, and they're holding this down. And that's when you're going to break it, is with RPM. It's not necessarily horsepower. So if you're rating rod bolts on horsepower, it's wrong. It's really on RPM and weight. You can get away with a lot of them on like I said, on boosted. If you're going to run nitrous or NA nitrous or NA, you really should think about upgrading your rod bolts right off the bat. These are going to be, this is like an ARP 2000 type of material. Then we're going to be doing an L19 for, which are going to be in our X beams. And then we're going to eventually have something else, and it's going to have a different material rod bolt coming out soon. So yeah, these are all new. They're coming. They're actually going to be starting to ship out pretty soon. This is actually just inspected. I just inspected this one myself. I think it was Monday. So someone's going to be getting this rod in their in their package that they've been waiting for 2 years.
Yeah. Well, but yeah. I've always heard that rod bolts, it wasn't necessarily on the overlap where they kick the rod. It was the decel.
Yes. Well, yes. And that's basically, it's decel when there's no load. So on decel is because when you're going over that point of overlap, when it's exhaust and intake, there's no force on that anymore, and it's 100% on this cap then. So yeah, when you decel, it's going to be even more, because now it's pulling it down. So yeah, exactly.
Yeah,
if you can kick it in neutral or push the clutch in, don't use the engine to slow the car down.
Engine brake,
don't use the engine brake. Now in the Cookie Monster, I have AMS 3.5 multi-phase rod bolts. They're like $80 each. Not worried about it. Each rod bolt's $80.
So Buick Smith asked, Shane, can a flat top or dish piston help with irregular forces compared to a dome piston?
Well, it comes down to combustion chamber, but yes, it will, because it's in how they are relationship to the combustion chamber. Obviously Hemis are going to help this out exponentially, but when you have like a wedge head, which is pretty much everybody has, big block Chevrolets are actually kind of the worst at it, because it's a canted valve, and they have really funky pistons, and how that flame front comes up and around and over the top of the dome piston. So flat top actually
I figured dome would be the worst. Dome would be the worst because it applies outside force moving inward.
Yeah, that's right? Exactly. That's why the big block Chevrolet is the absolute worst at everything.
And makes shitloads of power.
Yeah. But yeah,
the flat top piston would probably be
the
best at regular force.
At regular force, and also to flame front. Whenever you can get a flat top piston, it just works better. Now, obviously, when you have a dome, you're going to gain because you're going to be making compression. But if you can get that with a smaller CC squinch area, soften, some of the, soften the chamber a little bit, it always works better.
Oh. So then John Wilburn says, this is my rod bolt. There are many like it, but this one is mine. So when you held up your rod bolt,
this is mine.
Yeah.
Michael Schmidt was asking a question about that.
About the rod bolt?
No.
This one here?
Oh, I don't know. I can't.
Shane, I will take an X-beam set of rods for flathead inline Mopar 6 ready to pay now.
Oh, yeah. Sorry.
I'm sure they got probably 2 or 3 different variants of that X-beam rod for a flathead inline 6 Mopar.
Yeah. I don't know. I've been designing them. I can tell you that's a big no.
Let's see. John Wilburn says a clean neutral at valve body shifts park reversible or your Prindle. Just shift. What is that?
Yeah.
Just shift to neutral on the top end after the run. Yep.
Absolutely. Yeah, that's my glides like that. I can actually hit neutral in mine if I wanted to, but I'm just not worried about it too much.
So in 1941, this is from Lount Burns. In 1941, IBM patented the process of getting chrome to stick to plastic. It involved potassium permanganate. This was the key to the process. And this is what we should do to fiberglass.
Yeah, there's actually a company out there that could do that. So they could chrome plate like plastics and fiberglass.
I imagine the EPA is all over them.
Yeah, they were out of
they put the potassium permanganate in your food, but you can't it's like hell to pay if you put it on your bumper.
They were out of like Santa Clarita area off the 5 freeway up there, by Saugus, by Magic Mountain in California. And yeah.
Let's see. Fab Race Mod Repeat, Shane, $80 a piece rod bolts. That sounds like some of those Oliver replacement bolts.
Yeah. Well, Oliver runs those, but at that time, Crowder did too. And Lou Notty's going to have that same.
Is that the L19 bolts?
No, it's actually above the L19. Yeah. So your L19 is like your H22, right? And then you're going to have, or H11, sorry. And then you're going to have it's a multi-phase. They call them like the ARP 3.5 bolt. It's a multi-phase bolt. So, and they're like, so if you normally have 60 or say 65 foot-pounds of torque, they're going to be like 90 foot-pounds of torque. So you have to set up the rods for them. It's not like you can just throw them in there because you're going to get a lot of deformation here. It's going to deform quite a bit because of that rod bolt. So they have to be set up for those. And they're actually heavier too, so you got to have them balanced with them in there too. So it's not like you can just throw them in there.
Oh, and it screws up your bob weight, and then you have to have everything rebalanced, huh?
Exactly. Yeah.
Well, I'm working on a project now. I'm actually taking stuff to be balanced at the machine shop. It's for non-Buick stuff.
Somebody sent me a text. They wanted to see the X-beam again, so that's basically what it looks like right there. Now, I brought in, this is a lightweight version of this X-beam, but it was exaggerated so that way you could see the X-beam, but it's taking force from one side to the next, like an H and an I. So you're combining both.
Well, and see, that should be the person messaging you should be Levi's Backyard Performance, because he was looking at building high horsepower LS stuff 5.3 and using non-factory parts. So he should be hitting you up about some of them X-beam rods, or even some I-beams.
Yeah, well, that for him, 1,400 horse is what the X-beam can handle. We've tested it to that, and they work. They handle it just fine.
Huh. Well, Buick Smith says, a little history lesson. An old blacksmith made bolts were hot formed threads, stronger than cut threads. The predecessor to the hot formed ARP rod bolts. I still have a tool to do those in the shop.
Yep, exactly. Yeah. Hot rolled is always the better. In fact, if you go to P1, you can actually, it's actually Point One is the actual name of the company. They have a bunch of videos on YouTube or you just out there you can actually watch how they do it. And they have a Facebook Facebook page too, where they put up a lot of pictures. So I'm actually really happy to be working with them on this.
So Jason from Jason's Garage just popped in. Good evening, y'all. It's good to see you, Jason. Haven't seen you in a while.
Yeah.
And hopefully you're going to make it to No Name Nationals this year. Danny Boyd says, "Oh man, one of the neighbors is grilling burgers or perhaps steaks." So, yeah. Well, you're playing nasal warfare.
Well, he's out there in San Diego, right? He's out in California, so that's
he's out in California, I think.
It's like 6:20 over there, so yeah, it's right about that time.
Okay. What's Levi asking here? What if one wants 1,500?
Send it. We've tested it to 14, but I can tell you right now, send it. He's asking, will the rod handle it?
Oh, will it handle 1,500?
Yeah. It comes down to tune-up. 1,400 horsepower is if a monkey was tuning it. If you have a good tune-up and it's got the right fueling, everything's right. Timing is everything on this, because remember, we're talking about irregular forces. It's how you're controlling those irregular forces at what RPM. Obviously, the higher RPM, it's going to handle those better. The lower RPM, there's a lot more force, because now it's going to have a lot more time to twist before it gets all the way down to the bottom. So tune-up's everything. A monkey can tune something up, and this will take 1,400.
Danny Boyd says, no, I'm in Ohio. It's after 9 p.m. Well, go steal their steaks. They won't be able to see you. So Buick Smith asked, Shane, what type of rods do they use in Top Fuel or Indy cars?
Okay, so in Top Fuel, it's aluminum rod, and if you're to look at it, it's an I-beam rod style. Literally, it's a block of aluminum, so it's going to look. I mean, it's going to be massive. It's huge. It comes up, and then you're going to have just a small little cutout right in here. I mean, it's a block of aluminum.
Yeah, it looks like a connecting rod, only bigger.
Yeah.
So.
And Indy, I mean, the rods are so damn small, they might as well be like motorcycle rods. If you've ever seen some of them, and most of them are going to be titanium.
Titanium
it's all about
motorcycle rods.
They're really, because remember, they're like, what's the size engine now? What is it? Is it a 6? Is it a V6 now?
In what?
IndyCar. Is it a V6?
I don't know. I don't even pay attention to IndyCar anymore.
Yeah. They keep changing the engine on it and the cubic inch on it and whatever. But there was a time there where there was a V8 and it was awesome. It's something now. But Formula One, Formula One is really where it's at. When they took some of the RPM away from Formula One is when I stopped watching it, because I like the 20,000 RPM. I love that screen.
Well, the sad part is IndyCar. I stopped watching it when kart and IndyCar split. That was 1984.
Oh,
right?
wow.
So that was the last time I watched anything IndyCar, because the kart took all the best stars, and then kart fell on space like within a couple of years.
Mm-hmm.
So, and then IndyCar went the way of Hondas and Aurora V8s and all that weird stuff.
I watched it for a while when they were having different engines, when they had different engine combinations, because I thought that was cool, because it was like, it wasn't like everybody had to have this V8 or this V. I liked the innovation of it. I thought
that's how IndyCar was supposed to be.
Yeah.
And then they mandated the engines in like 95 or something. And then it just was like, this is terrible. Why would I want to watch something that's like IROC only in go-karts?
Yeah, literally, it's a go-kart at that point. It's like, okay, here's your chassis, here's your engine, and it's just a different painting on it, and go race.
Yeah. And so Danny Boyd saying the Aurora V8, the Buick V6, I believe. Yeah, the Stage 2 V6 Buick was like literally the off-the-shelf piece everybody was using in like 87, 88. But then when they came out the Aurora V8, I think that was mandated, and they had to run that Aurora V8, and it was just like, I think it only lasted like 2 years. He also says he liked the kart series. I did like the kart series too. I like when they did the cities and stuff too.
Mm-hmm.
He says that he wasn't much of an open wheel fan though. I don't want to. When I was growing up a kid in the 80s, it didn't really matter what kind of. You only had like there was some people had cable. Most everybody had 3 channels, like
Yeah.
CBS, NBC, and ABC, right?
And
And
I
it
was a
didn't
channel
matter.
changer.
Yeah, it didn't matter what kind of racing was on. If racing was on TV, you were watching it if you were a fan.
Yes.
And so we watched kart and IndyCar and
Mud
watched
bogs.
NASCAR, mud bogs. When we got cable in like the late 80s, early 90s,
Mhm.
my dad used to watch the
Speed Vision.
swamp buggy racing on
I
like
love
TNN and stuff, dude.
the sippy hole.
Yeah, the Sippy Hole. Yep. And then they had those what the boats that would turn on a dime
Oh, I love that.
in the waterways. Those were freaking cool, and it was all like Diamond P Sports. So it was like you had Steve Evans and you had Dave McClellan, and they were all the voice of drag racing, but they'd be announcing this freaking swamp buggy race, or
Yeah.
it was so freaking cool, man.
I loved it. Yeah, that's we had like Speed Vision because we got cable at that point, and it was just like nonstop, like just like you said, swamp buggies, sand drags, tractor pulls, and that's when I was really just like, look, I don't care about any of that other stuff. Duke boys are cool, but I'm watching real people do real things, and then I realized that there was a drag strip in our town, and I started going to that, and then what I really dug is when my uncle started taking me to some of the street races. I thought that was the coolest thing ever because what I saw on TV, I was watching like in front of me.
Yeah. Well, the coolest thing about those days was like you remember the tractor pulls, but you had like the United States Hot Rod Association or something, US. Yeah.
Yep.
And they had the monster trucks with the tractor pulls, and you had like
Yep.
the Orange Blossom Special and the
That's
Stinking Lincoln, and there was all these cars that were like super special just for tractor pulls, and they all had their own personality, their own flash and flare, and it was just exciting and fun to watch.
I
And
agree.
all that went away. It's the same thing that happened to drag racing, happened to NASCAR. It all got sold for the sake of speed because one person signed something out to death, and then everybody else followed suit. And then all of the flash and flare went by the wayside, and the home built ideas and in this one thing, because of big money, made everything expensive, and it just all became unfun.
Yeah.
So I'm just gonna, and that's where I'm gonna take my own stuff and just go backwards. I'm gonna go to the track. I'm gonna have fun with it. I don't care if I win a damn thing. I don't care if I lose to the slowest guy in the damn pits. I'm gonna go there. I'm gonna have fun, and people are gonna remember my junk.
And
That's it.
that's what I'm trying to gain back by having Plan Z is I don't care if it runs a 10 and eighth mile. I'll be able to do that for the next 10 years with that engine, and it will, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And it'll be fun, and I can play with it, and I can, little changes will make a massive difference because you're dealing on this end of the spectrum. You're not already over here, on the exponential curve where you got to do all this stuff to go, a tenth of a second. You do one little thing on this car, you're going to pick up 2 or 3 tenths like that, and it's one of those things at that speed, 1/10 here could be 2 or 3 tenths on that end. So it just makes it more fun. And how cool was it too when you were going down the drag strip, at your local place, and you and your buddy had 15-second cars, and you thought they were the fastest things in the world, and you're racing and you're looking at each other going down the track. That was the coolest thing ever. Or like your buddy at the stoplight, coming back from the 7-Eleven, right? And he's like, dude, we're gonna get it on. And then you're literally door to door. I thought that was the coolest thing in the world. So that's kind of what I want to get back to, is having fun.
That's what I've longed for a while. The most fun I ever had was when I had the slicks, or either in the back seat or the trunk, and I'd drive to the track, change my tires at the track, go run about 4 billion passes, and then take all the slicks off, put the street tires on, and go home at 1 or 2 in the morning. It was just a blast.
Yeah. No, I agree. And that's, that's just fun, man. I just want to have some fun with it again. So where it's not like you're working on the car 90% of the time driving at 10. I want to work on it 10% and drive at 90,
Michael Schmidt says, He just watched a NASCAR 1951 race. Just watched a YouTube race and listened to the yesteryear announcer and loved it.
Oh, I
That's
do
what
that all
it's
the time.
supposed to be. Yeah.
And when I'm working on a model at work, I'll put up in the background something. I put on my headphones and I tune out the world, and it's 1960. It's 1950. You know, you're talking about Petty, and you know, and it's just cool. You know, you listen to the announcers of the drag racing. He's got the rosin out. He's putting more rosin down. You know, it's just when they're doing the match
funny
racing.
thing is, the driver was putting the rosin down.
Yes, that's what I'm saying. Yeah,
It
yeah,
wasn't
exactly.
Buster Couch putting down. It was the driver.
Yeah,
you want to
so
hook it up? You'd prep your own lane, right?
Yeah, he's out there doing a burnout, and he's like, yeah, he's got a couple dry hops in there, and he's getting out of his car. He's throwing out some more rosin. He goes out there and he's backing up, and they're doing all these like hard launches and stuff. And you know, they're getting in and out of the car so many times. You know, you're like, they probably didn't put the seatbelt back on.
Yeah,
that's the one when Grumpy was racing Landy.
Landy, yeah.
That's
the Dust Devil Garage says people remember the 8th mile wheelie far longer than the 3-second pass.
Agreed.
Yeah, it's the glory. You know, that's where I know if all these heavy hitters show up this year, the 28 10-5, I'm gonna do my best, but I'm not gonna tear my junk up to run with everybody.
No,
I don't have the kind of coin to do that, and it's not my focus at the moment. I'm gonna let her eat. If it ain't enough, I'll pull the travel limiters off the front, and they'll have to pass me as I'm, you know, in a total different Z plane than them. So it's fine. Okay. Let's see. Mama 3.
Shane.
Colleen here says, Shane, did you ever wire reverse lights to a switch, race lights, or was that just an East Coast thing?
No, I never did that. Did you? Did you know what she's talking about?
I never did that, but I did screw with people with turn them on reverse lights on a switch. When you're we used to cruise Main Street in Paxton, Illinois, right?
Yeah.
And it was like a 2-mile cruise, and it was like stop sign, stop sign, stop signs. I mean, so you're bumper to bumper all the way down this cruise, and I turn my reverse lights on a toggle switch, and people freak out. They think you're going to back up on them.
Oh, okay. Now I see what you're saying. Yeah. No, Colleen, I can tell you right now that I've always had Mopars, and my reverse lights have never worked, except for the Cookie Monster's the only one that's ever worked, because those 3 pins that go in there, I never had one that worked that would stay on there. You would drive them long enough, they would fall off. The car wouldn't start. So literally I just had it looped around. So yeah, my neutral safety switch would almost never work.
Dizzy Izzy says, do you guys remember the LA Dart rear engine 426 wheel standard engine in the trunk turned backwards, a 65 and a 70, I think? Yeah, that thing was big all the way probably till the 90s. There was a bunch of them there. Okay, so there were some really interesting ones. The backup pickup, if you've never seen that one, with the body on backwards and does the wheel stand backwards. You had the Chuck Poole's Chuck Wagon. It was literally like it was like a freaking wagon.
Yeah,
like an 1840s wagon on a car chassis, and it used to do wheel standing. Of course, you had the little red wagon in the LA Dart. There was I got a book about the exhibition stuff. I used to love the exhibition stuff when I was a kid. That was the purpose for going to the drag strip, you know, and it was like every weekend we would go up until I was 10, I think, and the track closed, 8 maybe. And every weekend, you know, we're going, and I'm like, oh, is the little red wagon going to be there? No, you know, but once a year, the weekend before Indy, all those guys would show up at our local Assumption Dragway and Motion Dragway is what it was called in Assumption, Illinois. But yeah, that we had all the big names that come out there and test because it's the same. It was the same compound that they used for the drag strip in Indy.
Yeah.
And so everybody wanted to get it all prepped up, right? So they'd come over, and once a year it'd be all the big names, and then you'd have the exhibition stuff too.
Yeah, how we would ask the races, we would just, because we all had the foot button high beams, you would basically just flash our high beams at someone. If they flashed back, the race was on.
Oh, we just pull up and say, hey, is that shit pile going to be fast as mine? Meet you out at Dump Road in 30 minutes.
Oh, we would just do it right at the light. That's what I'm saying. So you pulled to the light.
No, we're cruising, so you couldn't do anything cruising.
Oh, Yeah.
Let's see. Buick Smith says, didn't Bill Linderman used to be the host of the vintage NASCAR series on Speed Vision? I don't know.
I don't remember the guy's name, but it's the same person that's on YouTube. And they're like little 1 hour, it's not a full 3 hour race. It's a 1 hour condensed, where what trips me out too is the pit stops. They pull in, driver gets out of the car, drinks some water, like they're putting tires on it. They get back in the car and they tear off. And it's like, you watch the guys now, they're like doing these things in 15 seconds, but you watch some of those older ones, man, they're just like, doesn't really matter.
Dude, what I like is when they get out, they would pull their goggles off and there'd be like a raccoon print around their face, right? And they drink water or milk out of a glass, out of literally like a glass, right?
Yeah.
They didn't have bottles or nothing, and they may be changing the tires. The guy might light up a cigarette and wait till they're done chinging the tires, flick the sucker around, and they just get in the car.
Exactly. I watch that. It's amazing. You're like, wow, that's like crazy. Like it's so like time now, but it's like back then it was just fun to watch. John Wilburn says, yeah, it was Bud Linderman. He hosted the car and track show.
Oh, all right. I'm just catching up right now. Levi's Backyard Performance says, Dallas, I'm in your boat. Just don't want to break it so I can race all winter and have a decent vacation. If I need more than 1,200 horsepower to win, I'm out. Yeah, I used to have a rule of thumb when I went to the track when I was racing Shane out in California. If I had to break out more than just basic hand tools, the sucker was going in the trailer and going home. Yep. I didn't want to lay in there in the dirt. I didn't want to crawl up under it in the trailer. Mm-hmm. I just was going to take it home and fix it right. When I had the leisurely ability to do it with time on my side.
I wanted to have fun. And that's why I like the NA stuff. That's why I liked it so much, is because you could show up, your car was set up, and you would go out there and you would just race. You'd throw some fuel in it. You'd have laughs, whatever. You go out and race again, have some laughs.
What was cool about it is like the cars were all kind of like, you couldn't really coax more than a 10th out of the car.
Yeah.
If you had more than a 10th, you were holding to begin with.
Yeah.
And so most of these guys would just go out there and let it all hang out. If you were the slowest guy in the class, they didn't care. They treated just like you're the fastest guy in the class. Everybody was the same. Yeah. And they were all cool. And what was neat about it being the NA group is we were like the redheaded stepchildren of the street racer groups, right?
Yeah.
The nitrous turbo supercharger guys, they didn't pay no attention to your NA junk. And then the NA guys, we didn't care about the nitrous turbos. It's easy to put, if your junk don't run good, put a turbo on it or put nitrous on it and you'll be fast.
But more people watched us race because our cars carried the wheels. Everybody else had, they would come up and they would barely come off the ground, where, we're coming up 2 or 3 feet off the ground and carrying that thing out there. It was violence. It was awesome.
Oh, when I first got out there and I got my car running right and tuned up, and I remember I had this fan, and my wife used to give me such a hard time about it. I had this fan. He was like probably a 65-year-old homeless guy in Southern California living in a freaking burned out Volkswagen bus, down by the river. But he would come out to Verona every weekend and watch the races. And every time I was out there, and it was before I put travel limiters or anything on the front, the thing would do these crazy, like 2-3 foot wheelies. And, I didn't mind the wheelies. It was coming down where it'd smack the oil pan sometimes. Or the other one was, if you couldn't tell if it got a good launch, but when you get a spool in it, they generally go straight. But if you got one tire that's like in some water or whatever, it'll move it to the side and you can't feel it when you can't see it.
Yeah.
Right. And so the car comes up and you can't feel where you're at. And you're always assuming it's going to come down and be hanging on the freaking wall. Right. Yeah. That's what I always envisioned it like,
me too.
Down, you're like, oh, I'm straight. Thank God.
Yeah. Yeah. Or the most unsettling thing is when I was actually shifting my car into second and the front tires haven't hit the ground yet.
The first time I did that was Gainesville, and it was such an unnerving feeling.
Yes.
And I wanted to let out, but I didn't want to, because I knew it would come down like hard, right? Like really hard. And man, I was just praying it was going straight and like, oh, please don't hit anybody, just don't run over anything, God,
I
it's
got pretty
nuts.
good at judging the distance by the wall, right?
Mhm.
So like, depending on when you look out the wall out the side, because that would be like, okay, I'm X far away from there because you can't see out the front, it's up in the air, Yeah, that was. And then I remember pulling it up, and then the lights coming on, and I'm like, I'm hitting second gear, and I'm like, this thing, because I would feel it come back down, like it would feel cushy,
Mhm.
and I didn't feel anything, and I'm like, oh man, so I'm hitting second gear, and then that became kind of the regular, when I was running that 28 tire. Mm.
Uh, well, oh man. Let's see. Levi says, I don't like the mantra of the whole nitrous or turbo fixes the power issue. I've seen tons of nitrous cars that run slower because they don't know what they're doing. Oh, yeah. That's
Oh yeah,
okay. So, what I was getting by that is like, there used to be a bunch of guys that were NA guys,
yeah,
and they didn't know how to put a combo together. And they would come to the track and they'd have the best of the best, good heads, good cam,
not
freaking
matched
more
though.
cubes. And the combo was just slow. And they'd like, oh, well, a car's built for nitrous. And that was used to be the joke is like,
Mhm.
oh, okay, it's built for nitrous. So go put some nitrous on it. We'll run. But it didn't really matter they put the nitrous on them or not. I mean, they were still generally slow. Some cars it will pick up because the combo is all wrong, and the nitrous fixes it because it makes a ton of torque, and that's what the combo needed to begin with.
Yeah, yeah.
So, but yeah, if they Dave Rear used to have a poster, and I should probably reproduce that for the AHRA. Dave Rear's poster. It said, "If you need nitrous or turbo or supercharger on your motor, you built the wrong motor." Right?
He built the engine wrong. Yeah, yeah, yeah. I remember that. I've seen that poster.
Let's see. Let's see. Buick brakes with that ribbed aluminum brake drums. That's my ticket right now. That's the one I'm flying high on. That I'll eventually finish this '63 Buick, and it's going to have aluminum drums all the way around.
That's
Yeah,
awesome.
yeah, I think that's totally bitching because a drum. Here's the difference between drum and disc brakes. Okay, people think you need disc brakes um, because the repeatability of a disc brake is there, and I'll tell you
Yes.
why. A disc brake has the least amount of surface area that you're going to get on a brake,
Hmm.
right? A drum brake has the most surface area. If you ever wondered why they still use drums to this day, is because semi trucks stopping 80,000 pounds, a drum is better at stopping that much weight with a small surface area than a disc ever will be. The only downside to the drum is it's all retained inside the drum, and the heat just goes up and up and up and up and up and up. But aluminum drums solve a lot of that. And
Yeah.
that's why I like aluminum drums.
And drums are self-energizing too. Once you get them engaged,
Uh-huh.
they'll engage
Oh, they'll pull
harder.
themselves. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Hmm.
Hey, did you know that Ben Alameda's got a YouTube channel? Did you know that?
I did. Clint was telling me that.
I
And
just
what's
saw it here. And
Michael Schmidt says it right here.
yeah,
Was the only NA guy in the Fox Body versus Grand National Series back in the day. He won with no power adders and said exactly that. Many don't know what they're doing with those power adders.
it's true.
We used to run with a lot of Ben
Ben,
Alameda stuff out there in Southern California.
he would race out there with
Yeah.
us.
Uh-huh.
Yeah.
So,
He have the yellow Mustang? Wasn't it the yellow Mustang?
no, that was Ernie Irwin Cellular, right?
Oh yeah, that's right. That was Ernie. What did Alameda have?
Ben
Was it
Alameda used to build the motors. You remember that guy that ran with us? I can't remember what his name is. McNasty had the
Oh, yeah,
Maverick with the big block
yeah,
Chevrolet in it.
yeah. Okay, yeah.
Alameda was his engine guy, but
Oh yeah,
Alameda used to
McNair.
build Ernie Cellular's motors, and they were
That's what it
Cleveland
was.
based motors,
Yeah, yeah,
and it was Joe Sherman versus Ben Alameda is really
yeah.
what that was.
Mm-hmm. You know, also too, I have a manual transmission. I might even put into that Plan Z.
Oh, with the slant. Dude, you should try a T5. It doesn't have enough torque to break a
I
T5.
have the T5.
Oh, do you?
Yeah, I got T5.
Huh. So one on cat saying that some trucks are built now with disc brakes in the rear. I didn't know that.
I didn't know that either.
And Danny Boy saying drums have less drag. Yep, and it's
100%.
constant. Even when you let off the brakes, they're no longer engaged. The disc it is constantly riding.
Yeah,
So
I actually on the Cookie Monster, I actually have spreaders. It's a spring, and that goes on the plate right on top. So when you release them, it pulls it apart.
read this. This is the best. This is Ernie Cellular's car that we were talking about. They used to run in that 28 or that 10.5 NA class that we were running in. That yellow 60s Mustang was so badass to watch. I literally didn't believe it was a gas motor. I thought it was some UFO stuff.
Yeah.
The first time I showed up on that track, you had the yellow Mustang that was a Ben Alameda motor in Ernie Cellular's. It's like a 65 Mustang, I think.
Yeah.
And he
Racing
had
Joe Sherman.
Joe Sherman's son, Steve Sherman, had a 63 Chevy 2.
Yeah, the orange one.
Yeah. And it had some gnarly small block Chevrolet in it. And it run these little dinky tires because like on a Chevy 2, you can only fit like a 9-inch slick. So he had this custom billet wheel made to fit a 9-inch slick in the center of that wheel well, or maybe a 10-inch slick. But those two cars, that's what started the match race madness stuff in the Southern California. Was those two guys did a best out of 3, and they were like the local favorites, right? And they're all motor, and it was all small tire stuff, no freaking tire turbo nitrous, nothing. Best out of 3, heads up, no crying. It was good. And that's where everybody else jumped on the bandwagon, and we just started pairing everybody up that ran. You'd go out and you run, and you'd say, okay, I run a 620. They'd find you another 620 car.
Yeah.
And you'd run them heads up, best out of 3.
I'm going to say a little something real quick about, Joe Sherman. The camshaft that's in my car right now in the Cookie Monster. This is why I wanted to run that cam, and I didn't want to change it. I made those profiles for Joe Sherman. So that whole cam family master, when I was at Crowder, he always told me he wanted to make camshaft profiles. He wanted to have his own. And so I was like, okay, well, let's do it. So then we started. Now at that time we just had Burkos. And so basically it's a master. So it's a profile. So you can there's lots of little tricks. You can take tape, and you can do this, and you can put little F followers or 5-inch wheels, and that will change the profile, and you can start playing with it. So, we whittled away on a few of them. And then once we find a master profile that we like, then as far as you classify them in as far as a lift typically. So say the lobe lift is say 440, right? And then you would have say the 270 all the way up to 295, a duration of 50 with say 2-degree increments, sometimes 4-degree increments. Well, anyways, his last engine that he built was for that Nova 2. Remember when he had that big black scoop?
This I was actually just going to bring this up. Yes, I do remember the black scoop, and that was right before I left. Yeah, and that's when you and I had just kind of become friends, and you did a cam for this thing.
That's exactly what it was. That was exactly what I did. And he went out and set some record with the damn thing.
And then his dad, you asked him what kind of duration numbers that we were looking at, and he said all of it, right? And you said, "Oh, okay, so you built this crazy gnarly cam."
I built crazy. I did.
And it was 0.2 faster than the record. And then it was on the 3rd pass, it just kicked out 7 of the 8 rods at the big end.
Yeah, because it was
so fast though.
Yeah, it was so fast. And he even said, I built this engine to break the record. If it lasts 4 or 5 times down the track, that's all I care about, right? And so anyways, those profiles are what in the Cookie Monster. So I bring it up 3/4 race cam, but I think it's off the top of my head, I think it's 273, 284. So those were the smallest intake and the smallest exhaust profiles that I made. And I put them, I was like, oh, I did this. And then, so that cam, I made that cam a long time ago. So that's the reason why I kept that cam. And I was like, well, I'm going to put it on nitrous. It's just going to run. It is what it is. But that was just an homage to Joe Sherman, because me and him were pretty close there for a while. And we became really close. So
yeah, the Match Race Madness, the family out there, like everybody that ran it was always the same people, and that's the only time we ever really went to the track. You would just go out there for a test and tune, but if there was a Match Race Madness, and Steve Sherman put them on, and so Joe Sherman was his dad. His dad would sponsor the event, and I mean it was like a small deal. And then Steve brought in, what is it, Jersey Mike's?
Yep, Jersey Mike's.
We brought in Jersey Mike. So when we'd have a Match Race Madness, they'd get everybody together after the first day, like qualifying was done. The next day was Match Race Madness. And the cars were equally paired. So they were looking for somebody that was a 630 car against a 630 car. You're running heads up, no crying.
And you would write them up on the whiteboard, and it was Jersey Mike's and Stone Brewery. Remember that?
They had Jersey Mike's on the table. Once they told you who you're paired up against, or this was a good race or whatever, you went over and got yourself some Jersey Mike's. You got like half a sub, and then Stone Brewery would give you as many beers as you could drink, right?
Yep.
So we, like the first time I went was just like somebody just told me about it, so I went out there and ran it, and it was fun. It was a good time. The second time I went, it was when I got to really meet the family. Everybody was like, oh, you're back and you're going to have a good time. And who are you running this time? And everybody knows everybody. And you're like, dang, this is pretty cool. And like the third time I invited my dad and my best friend out from, he lived in North Carolina, just got out of the Army. And I invited my dad out. My dad drove all the way to Southern California to see this thing. And we sat in the pits with Joe Sherman, with the guys from Terminal Island, the Brotherhood of Street Racers, and we just got liquored up drunk in the pits, right? And ended up sleeping there all night, waking up the next morning doing some drag racing and feeling like crap. But
so for the people who don't know who Joe Sherman is, this is the guy who invented the 383 Chevrolet. He's the one who took the 400 crank, cut it down, put it into 350, and made the 383. And he set all kinds of records with small block Chevrolets, Camaros.
He had the fastest in the world 327 Chevrolet, the fastest in the world 350 Chevrolet, the fastest in the world 400 Chevrolet. He was the first guy that set all the records with the Chevrolet stuff.
And he won the very first Engine Masters.
Yep, the very first one. Yep, that's right.
Yep.
So he knew what he was doing.
Yeah.
But it was like my old man came out from the Midwest and was like, this place is like Hot Rod Magazine 1968, just fell on my face. I'm like,
right.
Oh, yeah, it was a good time.
Yeah.
So, and there you go. John just put up some links to Joe Sherman's, Engine Masters win. So, yeah, the guy was really, really cool.
And the reason why I brought up the camshaft thing is because when I went to Newport to go out there to do some testing with Just Mopar Joe, one of the guys came over to me and he's like, man, I just love how that car sounds. That thing is just amazing. Like the cam in that thing sounds awesome. And the only reason why I even thought about the whole thing is because the guy mentioned it and I didn't tell him. I was like, I didn't go through a little story, but in my mind, I was just remembered. I was like, oh, that's right. I remember doing those profiles with Joe Sherman. So, yeah.
So I'm reading some of these posts here. Okay, so mostly old parts and rust says Buick Smith, we have a local place that grinds the shoes to match the diameter of the drum. They last a long time.
Wow.
The Blue Grit Garage says, I got tired using both feet to stop while pulling up on the bottom of the steering wheel to stop with the drum brakes. Those are probably some manual drums, but or if you're going downhill, that's when you would notice drum brakes really sucking.
Absolutely. Right? Or at the end of a drag race. I've already told that story.
Yeah, but I'm fine with it because my car won't be running. It's running 8th mile. I'll probably run the quarter if I go to the Buick Nationals, and it might hit 110, if it's lucky. So I'm not really too worried about that.
Yeah.
Let's see. Michael Schmidt says, I bought the Amco shoe grinder and the factory tools to completely adjust brakes for the entire Plymouth Owners Club out here. Still want disc kit eventually.
Yeah.
All right. So Mohawk62 says, got to get going. Have a great night, everyone. Great live, Dallas Shane. Thanks. And we got to get out of here too. We only got about 5 minutes left.
Wow.
So, all right. See you later there, Mohawk. And we'll get tonight wound down.
Yeah. Well, like always, go and see Mr. John Wilburn this Friday on his channel. Just basically John Wilburn. It's
John
really nice
Wilburn
and simple. 7 Central on his. And go check him out. I'm not sure what he's got going on. He'll probably post it up here. But go check him out. He's kind of like I don't say he's the bringer of the No Name Nationals, and I want to say our sister video, but he's kind of helps us out, and we help him out. So yeah, we always do that.
We're all in the community. We're patting each other on the back and giving each other thumbs up and helping things out. So, and just remember, like, Shane and I are both helping out Clint Street Machines here and getting some kind of street machine together for the No Name Nationals, because this would be year 3 that Clint would have set it out if he didn't. And so we're trying to bring you Clint Street Machines at the No Name Nationals. So if you get the opportunity to help the man out, give him a call or drop him a note and tell him what you got. Maybe you can help him out.
Well, here's what we have to do, me and you, is that we'll get this week. We'll figure out what we need other than what we already have. What's going to work, what's not going to work, and then we'll throw it out to the community so that way we can kind of get some things coming in.
Well, I do know there's some certain things that Clint's going to need.
What's he said? Well, then let's put it out now.
Well, Clint's going to need some mufflers. You got some used mufflers? You got preferably something, it doesn't really matter, but I'm looking at 2 1/4 to 2.5 inch. You got any of those that'll fit on an S10 pickup?
You know what? Let me look around. I got to have something. Oh, Buff Del Campo showed up. I wanted to personally thank him. He got me something really cool. He got me those vents for my 68 Dart. Remember we were talking about having the stacking, air stacking under the hood. So I was going to put some vents on there, some like Trans Am vents on the side of the car, so that way it can extract some of the air. He sent me some vents, man. It's awesome. Thank you. Thank you. I wanted to say thank you, Buff.
Well, and here you go. Here's something that's kind of cool. John Wilburn says Tech Talk Live is where you learn how to do it. Friday Night Live is where you tell us if it worked and you blew it up. So, yeah.
We got the 9 o'clock warranty. So here it is. Whatever we say, don't listen to us, right? At 9 o'clock, all warranties off.
Yeah. This is the weird hour for us. Hey, right. So I didn't tell you, I was brainstorming yesterday, and I think I can build a dragster. I should have said this at the beginning of the video when everybody was bringing up the one with Jeff. I think I'm going to build a dragster out of an S10 frame in just part of a cab.
Oh, yeah. And like 1960s style buggy.
Yes.
That'd be awesome.
Yes. And then have what I'm going to do is bring the cab backwards like 4 feet or 3 feet. And then literally have all the motor and transmission exposed. So if you wanted to do a motor swap, it's literally like Velcro, like
it's a zipper.
Yes. And you just put it in, drop it in. And then the whole rear end, I was like, oh, it's got a 7.5 inch rear end. And then it dawned on me, what they do in the 60s? They put a 1-ton truck rear end in it with 456 gears and a locker. Done.
Yeah, right.
4 floaters, 8 lug, the whole 9 yards. Right. But I think I might do that once I get done with the rest of this crap on my plate. I don't know. So, all right. Well, okay. And I guess it's just about time to get out of here. So we will see you cats on the flip side. We'll be back here next Wednesday, and we'll bring some new tech to discuss next Wednesday. So
yeah. And if you like some of our tech, let us know. You can if you want to know more about rods or anything like this, I'll keep some of the stuff around here so you guys can kind of see a visual on what we have. And yeah, luckily I have a little insight into the community, into the business.
All right. Well, we'll see you next week then.
Yep. Guys, take it easy.
All right. We're out.